get your worksheet, you're going to get problems that are 45, 45, 90s and 30, 60, 90s. I'll talk about that in a minute, 30, 60, 90s. In order for you to tell if it's a 45, 45, 90, you will see a triangle, and you could have it in different ways, but it has to tell you it's a 90-degree angle. Everything in this chapter involves a right triangle. And then they have to give you something that tells you it's a 45, 45, 90. They could give you one of the 45s, and you automatically know the other one has to be 45 because the three angles add up to 180. They could give you a triangle the same way with the right angle, and they could say these two sides are equal. If those two sides are equal, it's isosceles. If it's isosceles, those two angles have to be equal, and they would both be 45. Does everybody understand that? So let's say I have this triangle here. We're going to look at this one. And let's say they tell me that the side of this triangle is a 6. Okay? And I need to find x, and I need to find y. I need to find the other sides of the triangle. We know that the other angle is 45, so we know that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our proportion. And we know that our proportion in a 45, 45, 90 is 1, 1, root 2. And we're going to set them up as fractions and put equal signs. Now, once you get good at this, you don't need the proportion. You can do it in your head. But for some of the harder questions that you might have, you need to use the proportion. So I'll just teach you how to use it so that you got it down pat. So now you look at the angles. What side, give me a side that's opposite this 45-degree angle. X. Does everybody see how to do that? It's the side opposite the angle, which is the lid of the angle, right? The one that closes it off. What side, somebody else, is opposite this 45-degree angle? 6. And what side is opposite the 90-degree angle? Y. Now, in those three fractions, there's one fraction that is complete. It's the middle one, right? You're going to use that middle fraction to find x and y. Well, x is easy. Does anybody know what x is?
6.
X is also 6 because those two sides are equal in a 45, 45, 90, so we know it. But let's say you didn't know that. You would take 1/6 equals 1 over x, cross multiply, and x equals 6. Okay? Now for the y, you're going to take 1 over 6 equals root 2 over y. Now I know we've been giving decimals for the answers to these questions, but you're going to start putting them in radical form for me, which means you're not going to put this in your calculator. You're going to do a lot of gunking, meaning sticking things together. Radicals are treated like x's. So here we're going to cross multiply also. We have y equals, because 1 times y is y, equals 6 times root 2. You're not going to put that in the calculator, okay? You're just going to leave that as your answer. So y equals 6 root 2. The reason you do that, we need to start practicing radical form, and this is a good lesson to start. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to put the sides under the angle they're opposite of, okay? It's not arbitrary. You don't just put them anywhere. You got to put them where they go. The only two that can be reversed are the x and the y because they're both under 1, so it doesn't matter. But in the 30, 60, 90, everybody has its place, and you have to put them in the right place. So let's find x first. We're going to say 1 over x equals root 2 over root 7. Because that's the full fraction. You have to use that full fraction. You can't use the x and the y. You'll have two unknowns. We cross multiply, and we get x root 2 equals root 7. So we do the same thing we do with any other number. We have to leave the x alone. We divide both sides by radical 2. And that gives us x equals radical 7 over radical 2. But we have a major problem here. There are two rules in mathematics that are pretty steadfast. That is, you can't have a 0 in the basement, and you also can't have something else in the basement.
A radical.
A radical, very good. So we've got to get a radical out of the basement. We can't have hoods in the basement. So we have to multiply this by radical 2 over radical 2. What is radical 2 over radical 2 equal to?
2. 4.
What is 1? Anything over itself equals 1. So we're really not changing the value of the number. We're multiplying it by 1. We're changing the look. We're getting the hood out of the basement. So upstairs we get, let me change color here, radical 14 over 2. And that is your answer for X. Radical 14 over 2. You got the radical out of the basement. At the beginning, I'll be a little forgiving if you don't get the radical totally out of the basement. But get help every time you have one so I can help you through it if you don't understand. So the beauty of a 45, 45, 90 is we know that these two sides are equal. And since they're both equal, y is going to be the same. You don't have to go through that painful process all over again. So this one is a 30, 60, 90. And if you know your square roots, which you probably don't, but the square root of 3 equals 1.73. So 1.73 is in between 1 and 2, so these are in order. 1, square root of 3, and 2 are in order, and 30, 60, 90 is in order. If you remember the 45, 45, 90, it was 1, 1 squared 2. I remember that one has a square 2 because it has two sides that are equal. And this guy has a square 3 because 30, 60, and 90 are multiples of 3. That's not why it has a square 3. That's how I remember that it has a square 3. Because you need to remember these ratios every time and write them down, okay? So you could have a picture that shows a right triangle with a 30-degree angle, because you know the other one would be 60. You could have a picture where it has a right angle and a 60-degree angle, and you know the other one would be 30. Or you could have an equilateral triangle, which when you cut an equilateral triangle in half, you get two 30, 60, 90s. Why is that? This angle here gets cut in half, and that was a 60-degree angle, and each one now is 30 degrees. You understand that? You're going to have one of those for your homework, so don't freak out. That's why I'm telling you. Okay, so you can see it one of those three ways. Let's do this first one. And we're going to put a measurement on here. Let's say I have, this is my 60. I like filling in the other information so I don't get turned around or confused. But let's say this is a 2. And I need to find X and Y. I write down my ratio, 30, 60, 90, 1 root 3, 2. Make my ratio. And now I'm going to put my x, y, and 2 where they belong. Where does the x go? Under the what?
Under the root 2.
Under the root 3.
Oh, root 3, sorry.
Somebody else, where does the y go?
Where it's supposed to go.
Where does it go?
Under the 2.
Under the what?
2.
Under the 2, under the 90. Because the y is opposite the 90-degree angle. So that means that the 2 goes under the 30 and under the 1 because it's opposite the 30-degree angle. Now, which fraction is one whole fraction? There it is right there. So we're going to use that fraction to find x. Just do it one at a time. And we have x equals 2 root 3. So that's what x equals. And this guy you don't get a break because the sides aren't equal anymore. So let's do the y. 1/2 equals 2 over y. And y equals 4. Now I want you to look at something. The ratio is 1 root 3, 2. So we have a 2 in the 1, right? Then the root 3, we gunk the 2 to the root 3 because it's 2 times root 3. And the y is 2 times 2, which is 4. So if you kind of see that ratio, you can do these in your head, but it takes you a while to see them. So just do a cross multiplying for now until you get it.